All right, welcome to the Cultivate NYC podcast.
We're here.
We have a special guest with us today. Yeah, it's very special. Come on now.
Oh, hey.
His name is Philip Sheegog. Philip, how are you?
Doing really well, Luke. Happy to be here.
If you know anything about Philip, he's like, I don't know what you're going to say. No, if you know anything about Philip.
I love Star Wars.
Yes, Star Wars.
Ooh, yeah.
And that's like the biggest coffee cup I've ever seen in my entire life. Like ever.
It's for, if you need a really big caffeine start to your morning.
You don't need 2 cups because that is about 3.
It is 3.
All in one. No, but if you know anything about Philip, Philip is, when I first met Philip, I'm pretty sure he just like introduced himself to like 13 people in the span of like 1 minute. So you
Is that how that works?
Yes.
I remember you actually coming up and you introduced yourself to me. You're like, hey bro, what's your name?
Okay, well, I'll give you a pass on that
Okay.
one. But you just have a very like invitational manner to you. You're very outgoing. I love when we have. I know when a new person shows up to Cultivate NYC that Philip is going to introduce himself and make them feel welcome. You know, my friend Alexander, who's from out of town, who's a traveling PT, he's living with me at the time, and that was
Alexander.
Yep, let's go. Shout out. He had that same experience meeting with you and you getting to just kind of make him feel welcome. You know, church can sometimes be a space where, you know, if you're brand new, especially with a smaller community like we have, you can feel like you're the outsider of the family.
Easily.
You know, and so Philip, you do a great job of making people feel welcome, introducing yourself. I remember you I'll never forget, the orientation was long ways in our office when we had the capability to do that. And you were sitting next to about 3 or 4 people, and it was just like, hey, I'm Philip. Hey, I'm Philip. Hey, what's your name? What do you do? And then, Philip, you come back the following week, and you remember their name and their story. So that is a characteristic of you that I really appreciate. And when you're not here on Sundays and you're traveling and doing, you know, all your things, it's your presence is missed because of that warm, you know, an invitational experience and manner that you carry yourself with. So, well, that is who you get to listen today on the podcast.
Trying to extend some of that invitational energy to everyone who's listening and watching.
Like, subscribe. No. But Philip Sheegog's with us today. Philip, I just want you to share a little bit with us to open the podcast. Tell us a little bit about your story, how you ended up here in New York City. Tell us about your life in. You grew up in Indiana, I'm pretty sure, right?
Yeah, absolutely. We were basically neighbors.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So go ahead, tell us a little bit about your story and how you've kind of seen God work through the different stages of life that you've gotten to live.
I mean, it's basically the story of my life,
which
is hopefully still has a couple chapters left in it. We'll see. But yeah, I mean, we can. I'll try to do the 40,000-foot flyover first, and then anything that sounds particularly juicy we can get into. Yeah. So I've been in New York for 10 years, or coming up on 10 years in August, actually.
Okay. So you're officially a New Yorker that way.
And I've heard that if you stay during COVID, it counts double.
So you're really here for 20.
If that. If that calculation holds, and I've definitely got my New Yorker card.
Nice.
And at this point, it feels like adult home for me. Like, of course, home in Anaheim, California is always home.
That's right.
You know, home is where mom is. Yep. So I'm born and raised in Southern California.
Okay.
Grew up in a very, how to describe it, like suburbia, but also in I love my family so much, like an amazing, supportive, loving Christian home. Family, I love them all to death. And there's just a tight sense of community within the family. Yeah. My 2 older sisters and I, we were all homeschooled by my mom. Shout out Mom.
Let's go.
And praise and blessings on mother. Right there's a
I would not be myself without you.
Oh, there's a verse, I think it's in Proverbs, that has become like a running joke in my family. Okay. There's a verse, it's in Proverbs 31, and it's talking about the wife of noble character, and there's a verse that says her children will rise up and call her blessed. And so at some point growing up, like, it became the joke that my sisters and I would just come up to my mom and say, "Blessed." Oh my gosh!
So but you mean it. You mean it. Yeah. That's really cool.
Really and so cool. It was an environment in which really just had the kind of space to grow and learn and experience. And so I guess the beginnings of the journey that led me here was that both of my parents are amateur musicians.
Okay.
It's actually one of the ways that they connected and re-met, having grown up in the same area, knew of each other, but they reconnected in their adult lives, partially through music.
Okay.
And so for them, the arts were important, and they wanted us three kids to just have that as part of our education, right? It's like homeschool curriculum. So what's the arts component?
Right.
Okay, you're gonna be involved in some way. And so that was my on-ramp into the arts. And so the story goes that my first inspiration as a youngster to pursue the arts was when I was 5. I wanted to play the drums.
Wow.
And my mother, in all of her blessed wisdom, said, no, not in my house. And so
we're not listening to that all night.
little Philip, his dreams were crushed. But my middle sister was playing violin from when she was about 5, when she was very young. And so a couple of years later, her violin teacher told my mom, I have a colleague in the area who teaches cello.
Oh.
And so you
very
should
much
have,
like the drums.
very similar to the drums,
You know.
pretty close. And so you should have your last kid take from my friend who's in the area, and then my mom plays viola, so you and your daughter and your son, you can all play together. And so that was how I started playing the cello when I was 8 years old. Eventually, a whole journey through that, some incredible teachers, right? It takes a village.
Yeah,
it takes a village
right.
too. But truly the support and mentorship of a couple of these teachers, especially in high school, right? When you're trying to figure out, who you are, what you want to do and be, and especially, right, trying to figure those out away from the auspices of your household of origin. Right. So a couple of mentors who really helped me grow and thrive in that area, to the point where when I was trying to decide, what do I want to pursue professionally, or at least go to school for, music was kind of like the main thing. It had become the primary thing that I was devoting my time and attention to. And in a funny way, especially in my early years, like I was very much kind of like middle of the pack, I would say. Like, was a good rule follower, like very respectful of authority. Yeah. So I would like do what I was asked. But it truly wasn't until kind of there were a few landmark moments that were like the times when I first started taking agency for my own musical development. The first time when I really was inspired. A couple of these like light bulb moments, combined with the teachers who were able to kind of capitalize on those and be like, all right, let's run with that. Yeah. Those are the things that in high school really allowed me to start really excelling and finding more and more kind of joy in the music making. So keep fast forwarding, eventually made my way out here to school where I studied down at Juilliard for 6 years, did both my undergrad and master's there, a lot of time in one building. Yep. But loved my time there. Again, so formative. And that, 6 years there and then 4 years out of school, that kind of fast forwards us to where we are today.
Yeah, that's amazing. Tell us a little bit about, like, I've gotten to see the behind the scenes of some sort just in conversations with you about how you found your unique avenue, if you will, into the professional life in terms of like your career. Tell us a little bit about how you kind of came. I'm going off the path here just a second, but I know the unique style of music that you play, the unique career path in which you chose. Like, tell them, our listeners, a little bit about like how did you think that you'd be a professional celloist the rest of your life, and that was your journey? Did you think that, well, I'll do some of it on the side with a different emphasis? Did you think you'd be teaching and mentoring predominantly? What was like? How did you find where you are now in your professional career, and did you think that you'd end up there?
Yeah, so they say hindsight is 20/20, and also naivete is powerful. Can be a powerful force for good sometimes. I was reflecting on this the other day. I feel like one of the things I've taken from my dad, who is an architect by trade, but this is a total side conversation, but his, I think the legacy that he is leaving and is still working on, his artistic project is he's turned our suburban backyard in Southern California into a Disney-themed garden railroad where he is rebuilding like the life-size buildings in miniature. He has like every single film.
A railroad?
There's like mountains made of concrete. It is insane. But anyway, the thing that my dad has taught me, or that I subliminally picked up from my dad, is pursuing and following vision.
Yeah.
And he'd always joke that and both he's said it and he's lived it, right? Sometimes things he says, sometimes things he does. But the following, sometimes you don't know how you're going to get to the end, but you know that the vision is the thing worth pursuing. Yeah. So for me with music, I can't say, especially in my early years, like when I was 17 and applying to Juilliard, it's like, you have no idea.
Yeah.
And just because you're good at something doesn't mean, or just because you're good at the craft of something doesn't necessarily mean that when it comes to actually making it a career and all of the extra things that come with that, that you're going to even enjoy that. Because
it's not just playing the instrument in any way.
No. I mean, I could probably ask you the same about building a church, right? Just because you love ministry or love seeing the work of God, like building a church
is way different.
Oh my gosh,
way different.
Right? It's like,
that's why I say plumber, pastor.
Exactly
everything.
Exactly. So the path to getting where I am now was not at all what I was expecting. And truly, it's something that I see in hindsight as, to me, it looks like the hand of God, like unmistakably. Like there are people who I met, formative conversations that I had that, it's like the 80-20 rule applied to life decisions, right? That 20% of conversations, or like a small amount of things, people, conversations, idea, have a wildly outsized impact. And I see that in the path that I've had as well. So the music that I do now, which is not exactly what I trained in, is not exactly what I even knew was possible.
Naturally, of course, naturally.
Yeah, naturally. It is something that I didn't see coming, but I'm so grateful that I have the opportunity to pursue and to be on the journey and see how God is going to use it.
Well, I know that Cultivate NYC has been blessed by you choosing to help us out with in our worship team and worship in that way, using your cello. And I always tell people all the time, like, there's so many different forms of how we can worship the Lord, and I fully believe. Listen, if I can sing and whatever comes out of my voice is actual worship, then literally anybody can use a gift for worship, and you've chosen to use that with us. And speaking of using that as a form of worship, how has it been choosing the career path in which you have, being in the arts, going to Juilliard, growing up as someone who is growing in this craft and finding that, like, okay, this might be my thing. How has it been being a believer in Jesus in these areas of the arts, Juilliard, be it high school, always kind of around other artistic people and creating music and whatever that looks like? How has it been a believer in those spaces over the last, 10, 15 years?
Yeah. It's interesting because on the one hand, I feel like it's being in the art world and a believer is kind of like riding on this knife's edge of, on the one hand, right, like the arts are an expression of humanity, right? Artists are the people who are probing the depths, pushing the limits, and then bringing that back to culture. Yeah. Right? They're the I think in their own way, right, truth seekers. Yeah. And that's a beautiful thing, right? On the flip side, I feel like being in the arts, it's oftentimes, especially in the secular artistic world, that expression becomes the idol, right? It's like self-expression, right? Especially in a very subjective culture, right? Like reality is what I feel it to be. Reality is what I experience it to be.
Yeah.
And that is the...
And in some instance, like you're creating that through an instrument or a song or a show. Like you're actually creating that event, that thing, what would you say, the truth, quote, the small t truth. You're creating these things, and then it kind of can be convoluted in a sense of like how you idolize it. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and even related to conversations we've been having, right, to be able to create, I think, is a mark, right, of image bearers, right, that God, of course, is the original ultimate creator, and that ability to create and to express, I think that is a mark of being image bearers. And so that's right. And so there is a fundamental seed of goodness in that. But when that becomes out of priority, right? Isn't that all of sin is, right, things that are out of priority, right? Or loves that have been turned to other things.
That's right.
So like that creative ability, that self-expressive ability, that overflow of the self, when that becomes the highest priority, then that's when we start to get that's when things start to shift.
Yeah.
And so that's an interesting place to walk in because, right, when you are interacting and doing work with and creating with people in that world, right, that is, right, people who are so gifted, artistic, so insightful, so open often, like openness is something that you just find in spades in artistic communities. Yeah. It's an interesting, I don't know, like every area of life and sector of human endeavor, I feel like reflects or shines light on different aspects of humanity, and therefore different aspects of God. Yeah. And I think that's probably the challenge in every area is how do we redeem that good thing, but how do we bring it into right relationship? Yeah.
And let me dig a little bit deeper into the creation portion of being an artist in this way. You're creating music literally from scratch. Like you're coming out with music. We'll hold that for later. But you're also you're creating, right? So like, how has it seen in the beautiful sense, in the redeeming sense, in the way in which you have got to know your creator more because this is the line of work in which you're in? How have those two things intersect for you? Has that been your experience? What's that like when, because you're creating something beautiful, and like many moments when I experience the arts as a non-artist as a profession. I got pushed back from an artist the other day. I was like, no, everyone's an artist, so like everyone creates. I just don't, I understand. I just don't do that as a profession, and it's not my natural way of thinking or skill set. Is to create in that way. When I experience the arts, sometimes the arts can be like the most moving thing that you experience in terms of like, holy cow, that was overwhelming. That made me feel some type of way. That moved me from a transcendental kind of experience in some sense. How does being a believer in Jesus, understanding your creator, how do you rightfully fit those two things in? And does it sometimes feel like this is a beautiful expression of who God has made me?
That is deep. Absolutely.
You and I typically, we never talk very deep, do we?
No, never. Yeah. Neither of us like to wade into the deep waters of human experience.
That's right.
I think one of the things that, related to that question, one of the things that's kind of been a grounding principle for me is that all the things, right, like I often ask, like, why me? Like, why is this a gift that I've been given, right? Why is it that a passion that I've been given, but also something that, right, when I play, like, people will come to tears. People will have experiences that they then relay back to me. It's like, why? And the grounding principle for me has always been that it's a gift. It's a gift not earned, but freely given, and therefore something that only rightfully can be given back. And as a Christian, for me, that's given back not only to like people as audiences, but also back to God, right? As an expression of gratitude and praise and thanksgiving. And so, but let's see, to get back to your question, like as it relates to me being a creator, I feel like some of the most powerful experiences I have are both right in experiencing artistic expression, often music for me, but then also in nature, which I'm sure many people do. But I think for me, there's a wonder and a beauty and delight in seeing nature as God's creation, right? In all of its awesome power and all of its beauty and glory and sometimes like terror. I was just at Niagara Falls over this past weekend.
So you got all of that in one.
Whoa. But yeah, thinking of and relating to God as a creator whose creation and artistic expression moves me and enlivens different parts of me. And so to think, okay, now the thing that I can create using my medium has the capacity to move other people and to hopefully express some sort of goodness, truth, or beauty.
That's really good. So based on the conversation we were having, we had someone ask on Instagram. So I posted that you're going to be on the podcast today. Someone asked on Instagram this specific question. I think it goes hand in hand with kind of what we're talking about here. And the question was this specifically: how has living your musical passion been for you while also maintaining a close relationship with God? What are some things you do that assist you with your walk with Christ? Which is a great question. Thank you so much for asking.
Yeah, I would say that framework or understanding, thinking of my artistry as a gift, that's been super important for me. Because again, if anything gets out of right priority or right hierarchy, right, if the gift suddenly becomes the idol, right? Or especially in the world of the arts as a profession, right, where things get so easily entangled with the pursuit of glory or wealth or fame, right? All these things, right? All these classic temptations. Then it becomes a really easy slippery slope, right? When the thing that's meant to be received and then given back out becomes something that causes you to turn inward.
It's the inverse of what it's supposed to be.
I think so. Yeah. Exactly.
Wow. That's amazing.
So for me, it's just like there's a specific piece that my duo has that is kind of like our current warhorse. We play it everywhere, and it's become kind of a calling card. And there's a moment. It's after this really chaotic, kind of stormy first part, it then mellows out into this chorale. It's almost, I'll use the words almost like angelic sort of sounds that the chords for it, this was written during COVID.
Okay.
And so I remember the moment when I was sitting in my apartment in Harlem, by myself. It was
not allowed to go outside.
It was great, having that space all to myself.
Right.
And I remember when that music came to me, or like when I was working it out, and there's something that feels so like so transcendent about that moment. And so every time when I perform it, it is kind of a spiritual moment. And people have actually come up to me after and they said, like, it looks like something's happening during that moment. And I'm like, and in the best way that I can, I express to them that it is, right, it's a moment of spiritual connection for me. Like, and every time when that happens, it becomes an opportunity of prayer.
Yeah.
Like literally, if you ever see me play this song, Letters from COVID, you'll see me like, and I always am just full of gratitude, right? That this thing that I just feel like a conduit.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's my mission to use the gifts that I've been given as a way to express something that ultimately points back to the beauty of God.
Philip, I got two more questions for you specifically. One is, do you ever get I can imagine being a performer, right? Because I don't like to think of preaching as performing at all, but I know that I have it I'm doing it this Sunday, and then it's coming up again, and then it's coming up again, and Robin and I kind of sharing the preaching duties here at Cultivate, but I know it's coming. I know I'm going to be preaching.
Yeah.
Is there ever an experience that you have as in like most professions and most walks of life, like where you're like, I just don't have it in me today? Like, I know I have a job to do, and I'm going to be playing for these people. I don't have the energy it takes. I don't want to do this today. Or is it always kind of this expression of like overflow, like something that you've just kind of, your passion and your career have just kind of aligned in a unique way where this is just something that you love to do all the time?
I mean, there's definitely days where it's like, where it is you don't always, or at least for me, I don't always have that. I'm just so ready to be expressive and to share this music. Now, sometimes it's like, it's a job also.
You're working,
And sometimes you just have to, be there and turn on for what you need to do.
Yeah.
And sometimes in performance, right, it's, that's a whole nother conversation around like performance. But like for me, oftentimes like there are other, I am aware that I am depending on the kind of performance, but I'm aware that I'm performing, but I'm also like running tech duties while I'm performing. And so my awareness is split with that. Also trying to be authentic and expressive.
Right.
But yeah, there's absolutely days or it's like when there's a super stressful and difficult sound check, but it's like, we have to open doors and you have to be on, right? All these people are here to experience something, and you are the vehicle for that. And so it's absolutely like it's not always it's not always this
just out of overflow.
Exactly.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, I'm gonna take a sharp right turn. Ooh. So you and I have had the opportunity. I did not put this on our sheet, so I'm really going off the beaten path here. So you and I have had the opportunity to meet, a couple times, a good amount of times, where we're identifying the idea of like discipleship as this thing where you and I come together and we sharpen one another. We think about Jesus. We think about the Spirit. We think about the Father.
Really deep thoughts.
Yeah, the lighting of the Trinity. If you haven't read it, check it out. Yeah. If you want to read it, one of us will read it with you, I'm sure. But the idea of like, us getting the opportunity to meet on a weekly basis, sharpening one another, just even also just like witnessing to one another of the beauty of Jesus, asking questions where we can just ask it in community. Hey, what do you think about this? Or this is a little bit confusing. How has our time not have nothing to do with me and nothing to do with you, the fact that our skill set, but the opportunity that we're making time out of our week to think about the things of God? How has that helped you? And how has that shaped your walk with Christ in a consistent way? If someone's listening to this and like, I've heard about discipleship. I've heard about, we talk about it all the time. What really is it? Do we sit there and are you feel like you're in like the seminary course of Christian life? Or tell them about what your experience is as we have gotten the opportunity to do kind of discipleship together, looking at the things of God and wondering how we continue to walk with Him and understand Him.
There is a fantastic quote that I love that I think relates to this. I think it's from the book Atomic Habits. Okay. Classic book. And I think the quote goes something like, our thoughts form our habits, our thoughts inform our actions, which inform our habits, which inform our life. Something along those lines, that there are our ultimate like life and the trajectory of where we're going and the things that we're pursuing and growing in are downstream of all these other parts. And at the top of the funnel is our thoughts. Yeah. But then right below that is our actions. And I think that idea of doing, and making time, making time for the things that are important. There's no such thing as not having enough time. It's only a matter of priority.
That's right.
And so it's like, is this Christian life, is growing in this Christian life important? And if it is, what actions, what are we doing towards that? And I think this one-on-one kind of, or small group sort of actually jumping in at a deep level. It is extreme. It is so formative. It's so formative because it gives the space, but also I'm not sure if safety is the right word, but there is an intentional space carved out to really be wrestling with things and to be thinking about things and to be feeling things.
Yeah.
Right? Was one of the things we've been talking about, how it's, and for two probably intellectually bent guys, very importantly, that it's not just about
That's right.
thinking the right things or thinking about God, but it's about how does our thoughts, our experiences, our life, how does that inform our heart towards God, which then our heart will then inform our actions and our thoughts.
Head, heart, hands.
Exactly.
That's
it's
it.
all reciprocal.
Yeah.
But the actual time that we've been taking, right, which also means, right, time that I'm spending and you're spending beforehand, right, reading, thinking about, reflecting on these ideas and truths of God, right, that is, and as in addition to, right, outside of like the normal, right, Sunday gatherings or the Thursday nights, right, for me, it's been extremely formative. It's been laying just additional layers of foundation. And I think maybe even in a longer term, more importantly than just, we're reading a great book and we're discussing.
That's right.
For me, it's rebuilding and reinforcing some of those habits, right? That I don't want to be a person who has read a good book every once in a while, but I want to be a person whose habit is to be thinking about the things of
That's
God.
right. Amen.
So
that's good. I've enjoyed it thoroughly, and I think just the habit of discipleship puts you in proximity with one another. It helps one another grow towards Christ likeness, but we also do it together. So I've always felt like discipleship is not this teacher-learner experience, but it's a life-on-life discipleship. It's life-on-life. You and I doing life together as we're learning about the things of God. We come in and we are contemplating. And discipleship looks different with everybody, you know? So you and I are we love to go deep, you know, and we're just going to ascend it. And then we need to make sure that we need to hold ourselves accountable to saying, hey, does this impact our lives? Or are we flying a plane at 30,000-foot view that never impacts the ground, right? So I love that you said that, but we can do that better together. We will do it not as well apart as individuals trying to do this Christian life on our own. We're not made to do it we're not made to do it alone. We're made to do it together. And so it's been an encouragement. I love getting the opportunity to meet with you weekly, and I hope we continue to do this until forever. But it's been a joy. Thank you so much for jumping on the podcast. Any parting words for anyone listening? There's a whole nother question set that I didn't get to, but that's part of you and I going into the left and right turns of podcasting.
I think the only thing I would say is that I believe that God speaks to us through our heartfelt desires and passions. And that was something that led me onto the path I'm on. And again, in hindsight, I see that God was working. I think Ignatius of Loyola talks about the consolations of the heart.
Yeah.
And so, I would just say, and if you feel those passions, those things that may be of the Spirit stirring up in you, pursue those and see how God will use that to glorify himself.
That's good. And I think sometimes we fail to look back and attribute those things to God, right? It's happenstance. It's I got lucky, or I put myself in the right position, or I worked hard enough to get here. When we look back, we see, this is what the Lord's doing. This was the move of the Spirit in my life, in this area of my life. Praise God that I'm here. I'm a professional cellist that get to do these things. It's not because of what you've done. It's because of what the Lord's doing in you, a gift in which you have. And so continually attributing our life and the things that happen in our life to God is something that I think you embody. And I think that's a moral of the story of the podcast, that we're continuing to figure out what does it look like for us to be image bearers on this side of heaven and continue to follow after Jesus. So thank you so much, Philip. I appreciate you. Until next time, those of you that are listening, this podcast exists to serve the church, grow the disciple, and help us engage our community for the gospel. And I hope today's conversation has done that for you. I know it has done it for me. So we will see you next time on the Cultivate NYC podcast. See you.